What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for Game Week 36. I'm going to run you through how the team is looking, thoughts on my transfers, whether it's worth selling Isak this week or potentially Marmoush next week instead. Buying Jamie Vardy, could that be a thing? And I'll quickly show you how I did in Game Week 35. So let's get into it. So let's start with how I did in Game Week 35. And it was a pretty decent game week for me. I scored 57 points total, which took me from 72k to 58k. So that top 50,000 finish is now in sight. Fingers crossed I can get there by the end of the season. And the last few weeks have been pretty decent. So game week 33, I fell to 125k. But in the next two game weeks after that, including my free hit in 34, I've gone up 65,000 places. And since wildcard 30, I've gone from 281k to 58k. So the run in to the end of the season is going pretty well. And I just hope it continues. In terms of where the points came from this week, I did make a change on the deadline stream to play Martinez over Raya. Basically, the clean sheet odds came out that Villa was slightly ahead, and I just used that as an excuse to switch. He got a save point plus 2 bonus, so that was a nice lucky return for me. Vardy 8, Munoz and Saliba both blanked. I'm a little bit disappointed with my Palace players against Forest, because I had 3 going into the final match. And I was on a very, very small green arrow, and I had Munoz, Sarr and Eze. And I thought if they all do well, this could be huge. I'm not complaining because Eze got a 10-pointer from a penalty. He took it ahead of Mateta and scored, so that was great. But Munoz and Sarr blanking was a little bit disappointing. Salah blanked again. He hasn't done that great since wildcard 30, but as I've discussed in other videos, there's just not much to do with him right now. You're just going to keep him in the team, and that's probably about it. Mbeumo ended up being my captain. It was close between him and Marmoush. In the end, it was a difference of 3 points, so not really the end of the world. And Isak obviously got another penalty, scored that and got bonus as well. The only slight issue was Evanilson was on my bench, but I was never going to play him against Arsenal. Like, potentially, I could have just benched Saka, not bought Mbeumo and played Evanilson. I wouldn't have been down massively on points, but I was always going to make that move. I was never going to let Mbeumo go, especially when I knew I wanted him this week in 36 as well. So, overall, a good week. Things are going well at the moment. I hope it continues, but you know what FPL is like. I'm not getting too far ahead of myself in terms of where I might finish because a red arrow could be just around the corner. Let's take a look at 36. So I'm pretty happy with how my defence looks this week. When I compare it to other people's squads that are being posted on social media, I think mine stacks up pretty well, if not is slightly better in some situations, at least on paper. That doesn't always equate to points, but I'm happy with how the back three looks. The weakest area is probably the goalkeepers. My choices are Martinez against Bournemouth away, and I don't think Villa are going to keep a clean sheet, or Raya against Liverpool away, and I don't think Arsenal are going to keep a clean sheet either. At the moment, I'm playing Martinez because the fixture is probably slightly easier, and potentially there's save points there, maybe bonus again if they manage to scrape a clean sheet, but I'm not expecting it. So Martinez is in goal currently. Maybe I switch that because I still back the Arsenal defence despite going out of Europe, despite going away to Anfield. But I think I'll probably play Martinez as it stands. Either way, one of my attackers is playing my goalkeeper this week, and there's nothing I can do about that. In terms of the back three, Nico Williams has been stored mostly on my bench since I wildcarded in 30. He'll definitely play for Forest. It's Leicester at home. If Murillo misses out, that does dent the Forest appeal a little bit. But they're still playing Leicester at home, right? They're a team that are struggling to score goals and have been for a while. And Nico Williams is fairly attacking as well. I'm quite excited about playing him this week. So that's decent. Vardy Southampton away, that's an obvious play, right? Great chance of a clean sheet. We know the attacking potential he's got. And then I've got Munoz. Now, on paper, Spurs away, not a great fixture. Spurs always find a way to score. So I'm not necessarily expecting a clean sheet, but I'm still pretty happy to play him this week. I think Palace will go full strength. Spurs have got their Europa League semi-final second leg tonight. If that goes to extra time, then potentially Palace will have a pretty good day on Sunday. Even if it doesn't go to extra time, I still think Spurs will rotate a little bit. Not massively, but enough that Palace will have a decent opportunity to do well. And we know how attacking Munoz can be. He almost scored in the last game against Forest as well. So in terms of fixture, Munoz is not perfect, but I still like him this week. And I think Nico Williams and Vardy will look great. On the bench, Livramento against Chelsea at home. Don't mind if he has to come on. And then Saliba against Liverpool away is my last player on the bench. Defence looking pretty good, I think. I should say no transfers planned this week for any of my defenders, and I'm actually hoping to get through the rest of the season without having to make a defender transfer. It's not that I think my defence is perfect, but I don't think it's that bad any game week, and I want to concentrate my transfers on attackers instead. So this week, obviously, you can see what it looks like in 36. In 37, Vardio against Bournemouth at home, Nico Williams against West Ham away, and Saliba against Newcastle at home. That's not necessarily ideal, but again, I don't see it being worth using any transfers on. I do have Munoz as well against Wolves at home, who I could play instead, but I'm a little bit worried that if Palace win the FA Cup final, there'll be a lot of celebrations and a lot of rotation in game week 37, and we won't know whether they've won before the deadline. So I might just bench Munoz that week, and then in game week 38, Livramento comes in against Everton at home, Saliba's got Southampton away, and then Vardio I just play again against Fulham away. So my current plan is no defender transfers this week, or potentially, or hopefully I should say, for the rest of the season. And I'm just going to get through and spend my moves on attackers instead. So it's a midfield 4 for me this week. I've still got the double up on Crystal Palace attack, so Sarr and Eze against Spurs away. Then it's Salah against Arsenal at home, and Mbeumo against Ipswich away. And Mbeumo is currently my captain. I don't see the armband changing this week. Last week I was on Marmoush and I said if I bring Mbeumo in, I'm probably going to switch to him. This week I don't see any switching. Like, even if we get a leak that Marmoush is starting against Southampton away, I'm probably still going to captain Mbeumo because I'm absolutely sure of his minutes. He's on penalties. Marmoush might not be. Haaland might be back. We don't know yet. So I think I'm sticking to Mbeumo. Even though I've got to 58k now and that top 50k is in sight, I'm still looking for the odd differential here or there. But I don't think this is the week to do it with captaincy. In game week 37, there's not really a standout, so maybe I can go different then. And in game week 38, I think a lot of people will default to Salah, and Saka's right there with Southampton away. Or potentially, if Saka becomes the most popular captain that week, then I could just go for Salah instead. So there's opportunities to go a little bit different the final 2 weeks. This week, I'm just going to go for Mbeumo, even though it's obvious and boring. With Sarr and Eze, I've already spoken about Crystal Palace players this week. I think it'll be full strength against Spurs, and I'm not really worried about playing either of those two players. In fact, I'm quite happy with them because they're both somewhat differential. Now, when I say that, right, they're not like 5% owned, they're like 20, 30% in terms of engaged managers, top 100k and stuff like that. But at this stage of the season, that's still differential enough. I think Spurs away is a pretty good fixture. Whether Eze is going to take the next penalty, I don't know. They almost seem to be alternating at the moment. But the fact that he scored has done him no harm. And so I like him. And then Ismail Sarr, it's him or Rodgers. And Rodgers is playing against Bournemouth away. So I think I take the slightly easier fixture and the player with lower ownership. And people are going to be still selling their Palace players this week. So I'm quite happy to play them. There's not really any other midfielders that I would want to bring in this week when I look at the fixtures. I mean, the obvious one, by the way, is Kevin De Bruyne against Southampton away. I don't have the money to do that, to get straight up to him. And then it just affects my plans for the final couple of weeks. So I'm just going to let him go, De Bruyne, and just hope that his minutes get reduced over the final 3 games. I think he'll start against Southampton for what it's worth, but there's always that slight doubt in my mind. So I'm going to let that one go. I don't need to take a hit to bring De Bruyne in. I've already got Mbeumo. And you look at the other fixtures for midfielders. Okay, Clivert or Semenyo would be okay, but then it's Man City away next week. I don't want to be doubled up on Bournemouth attack that week specifically. Maybe in 38. You know, Gordon, Barnes, Murphy, it's just not the time to bring them in. I don't want like a Forest, like Elanga. I mean, Elanga's fine, right? You could definitely argue that Elanga is better than Eze and Sarr, but is it worth using a transfer on? I don't think so. So both of those players are staying. I think my worry for Palace is 37 onwards because we won't know whether they've won the FA Cup or lost it before the deadline. If they lose it, I think it'll be pretty full strength in game week 37, even though it's 3 days later. But if they win, I just worry about rotation. So my plan will be to start getting rid of them or benching them in 37. And then as for Salah, there's just nowhere to spend the money. If we get a leak on Saturday that Haaland is starting, there will be some temptation to sell Salah to someone cheap, like maybe Sharda from Brentford or someone like that, and then upgrade one of my forwards to Haaland. But I'm not going to be massively confident about his minutes that particular game. I mean, 60 minutes might be enough against Southampton, I get that. But then you've got a game 3 days after the FA Cup final. Would he definitely start that if he's just back from injury? Presumably, if he's fully fit and available, he will, like he always does. But there's going to be those slight doubts. So I just don't see me getting Haaland. I'm just going to take it on. I think there's better transfers to make for the final couple of game weeks. And I don't want to take a hit to get Haaland this week. I'm just going to be happy enough captaining in Burmo. So I'm pretty sure Salah's going to stay for the rest of the season, partly because I just don't see where to spend the money. And by the way, just on the De Bruyne thing, some people might rightly point out that if you want De Bruyne, you can just do Salah to De Bruyne in one move. It wouldn't take a hit. That is true, and I would much rather have De Bruyne for this week specifically, but for 37 and 38, I'd rather have Salah. So for 1 week, like I said, I'm just going to let it go, and hopefully it doesn't punish me too much. And then up front, I've got Evan Nielsen against Aston Villa at home, Isak against Chelsea at home, and Marmoush against Southampton away. Unless we get a leak that Marmoush is benched, there is no way I can sell him this week, and I'm not expecting him to be benched either. I think he will start that game. He has been disappointing recently. Lots of us captained him in 33 in a double, 2 blanks. People are getting frustrated with him, but there is no way I can sell a City forward before they play Southampton. So he'll be staying this week. There is potential for me to sell him in 37. I think Marmoush's minutes, even with Haaland back, will probably be okay enough to keep him for the rest of the season. But there is a temptation to sell him in 37. I'll come on to that in a minute. With Evan Nielsen, there's lots of other forwards being brought in this week. Wood, Visser, Cunha, the top 3. I do have 2.5 million in the bank. So I could do Evan Nielsen to one of those 3 players. But Evan Nielsen is a huge differential. Sarr and Eze I spoke about already. They're like 20-30% ownership. It's still somewhat of a differential at this stage of the season. I think Evan Nielsen, top 100k or something like that, is less than 5%. That is a huge differential. And Villa at home is not a bad fixture. And he's got Leicester at home in game week 38. Now, he will get brought in game week 38. No doubts about that. People will target Bournemouth attackers. But his ownership's not going to suddenly skyrocket to 100%. So I quite like the idea of holding him. If he can get close to matching Wood, Visser, Cunha this week, I'll be pretty happy with the decision to hold on to him. And I've got to look for differentials where I can. And I've already got one in my team that also has Leicester last day of the season. So I'm looking to hold on to him. I probably will have to play Evan Nielsen against City away in 37, which is not ideal, but it's also not terrible. So he's probably staying. And even though I've got the money in the bank, I probably won't buy any of those forwards I've just mentioned. Isak is an interesting one. I don't think he's been playing particularly well recently, but when I think about players for FPL, like in order of how good they are, right? Salah's right at the top. Isak's the next tier down. So he can get goals against anyone. He is up against 3 tough enough defences to end the season. Chelsea at home, Arsenal away, Everton at home. But he could also score in all of those. So I don't look at him as someone I have to sell, but his ownership is high. If I'm ever going to back against it, this is the time to do it. And also that would allow me money for other moves in 37. So I am considering selling Isak, but I don't think about him as a must sell. So let me talk through the potential options I've got. The first set of moves is basically to get funds, to get more money in the bank. So either I sell Isak this week to Visser, Wood or Cunha, or I sell Marmoush in 37 instead. But because he's cheaper, I can't get a forward quite as good. So it would be Vardy, Beto, Delap. If I sell Isak this week, I'm probably leaning towards Visser. All 3 of those players are good. It's almost a coin flip. I get the argument that Cunha's last 3 fixtures are decent. He's a bonus magnet, absolutely. But I feel like I've got to buy a player playing a relegated team this week. So then it's Visser or Wood. And because I've gone without Chris Wood for most of the season, I'd probably just buy Visser instead. Although I've not owned him either, interestingly. But I'm leaning more towards Visser if I sell Isak. If I sell Marmoush, I probably won't go for Beto because Everton have got a lot of forwards fit at the moment. And so minutes are an issue. I could go for Delap against Leicester away, but Vardy's got Ipswich at home. And if he blanks in 36, which I'm hoping he does, because Nico Williams is in my 11 and he's playing Forest away, then he's still just 1 goal off 200 for Leicester. Bearing in mind he's leaving at the end of the season. What happens in 37? His final home game ever for Leicester, and it's against Ipswich at home. Now, I know Leicester are terrible, but Ipswich at home is their second best fixture of the season after Southampton at home. So could he get his 200th goal? I'm writing the narrative. At this stage of the season, we write narratives more than any other stage. I'm writing it for Vardy. I kind of want him for that game. His final game. He's been a legend in the Premier League. He's been brilliant in FPL when Leicester have been in, obviously, the Premier League as well. I kind of want to do that move. But Marmoush, I think, will start the final few games, and the fixtures are better than Isak's got. So I don't know. If I sell Isak, I'll get a better forward. But if I wait till 37, I've got the Vardy narrative, and I just keep Isak. I'll play him against Arsenal, and I've got him for Everton last day. So one of those 2 moves gets me the cash, and then I've got 2 options. Option 1 would be to do Eze or Sarr to Palmer. Now, I would absolutely sell Sarr before Eze, but it depends how much funds I've got because price changes might affect things. Which forward I buy also affects things as well. So one of Eze or Sarr, bearing in mind Gameweek 37 is after the fixture for them is after their FA Cup final, would go to Cole Palmer, and that would be for captaincy reasons. Because in 37, there's not really a standout. I actually put a tweet out the other day asking people who they were going to captain that week, and Palmer was pretty popular. And I think the reason is Man United are probably going to rotate a little bit before their Europa League final if they get through tonight, which looks quite likely. And Palmer's ownership is really low. Like, he's a huge differential at the moment, and he's had like 43,000 transfers in, but that's not that much for what he's capable of. So, and look, people will buy him next week, so that ownership will go up again. But he's a bit of a differential against Man United at home in a week where there's not really a standout option. Like, I'm not going to captain Vardy, I don't think, even if I bring him in. Salah will be the default against Brighton away. So potentially I'll go there, but I could buy Palmer. If I buy Palmer in 37, I would then do Palmer to Saka in 38 because I want Saka for Southampton away. And also, if by game week 38 Chelsea happen to have Champions League places wrapped up, Palmer would probably get rotated because they're going to have a European final to play as well, Chelsea. So that would be the option. Or option two, once I've got the money from selling Isak or Marmoush, would be the same player out, Eze or Sarr, and that would be to Saka. So dodge Palmer, captain Saka against Newcastle or Salah against Brighton, and then have Saka in place for the Southampton game as well. And then in 38, sell one of Eze or Sarr to Kluivert or Semenyo to get an extra Bournemouth attacker against Leicester. So as it stands, that's my plans. They could change absolutely, but I quite like how that works. And all I've got to do is sell one of my forwards. I think selling Eze or Sarr in 37 is pretty easy. And then in 38, I either sell the other one or I bench them. Basically, that's the plan. I'll show you how it works in the My Team tool, but that is how the team is set up for this week. Potential transfer for Isak. If not, I'm going to roll and I'm going to captain in Burma. I'm actually pretty happy with how my team looks. And I think I've got enough differentials. Like Nico Williams' ownership won't be that high, although Forest's ownership overall defensively will be. Sarr, Eze, Evan Nielsen, they all look pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with how the team looks, but let's see how those plans look on paper. As always, by the way, if you want to check this tool out and all the other ones that Fantasy Football Hub have got, they've got a 7-day free trial link in the description below if you want to check it out before the end of the season. So let's go through with the Isak move first of all. Don't panic about my goalkeepers and defenders and stuff like that. I'm not going to keep changing them about for the purposes of this. This is more about what my attack will look like. So Isak out, and I would probably buy Visser. That would probably be my top target. That would give me 2 attackers against Ipswich. I'd be pretty happy with that. In game week 37, I then have 5.1 in the bank, so I could afford, if I wanted to captain Palmer that week, to do Sarr to Cole Palmer as it stands. Like, price changes by the time I get there might mean that's not possible, but then I would just sell Eze instead. And then in game week 37, I'd probably bench Munoz, like I said, just for safety because of the FA Cup final, and I'd probably bench Eze as well and just play Evan Nielsen against Man City away. So if I do the Palmer move, I've got Saka against Brighton away, and Burma against Fulham at home, Palmer against United at home, Rodgers Spurs at home, which I'm pretty happy with, and then Visser, Marmoush, and Evan Nielsen up front. And then in 38, I would have to sell Cole Palmer, and I wouldn't have to, by the way, but I would probably want to, and get Saka against Southampton away. I've kind of earmarked getting Saka back ever since I sold him. So I would then bench Eze rather than sell him, and I just have to play Rodgers against Man United away, which is really not the end of the world. So the Palmer option can definitely work, but I think the team looks a bit better in 38 if I go for the Saka route and just buy Saka in 37 instead of Cole Palmer. Like, I really don't mind captaining Salah against Brighton all that much. So let's just go back. This time I'm going to sell Marmoush instead. So 36 I would roll. In 37, Marmoush gets sold for Jamie Vardy. Like I said, I'm not even sure this is a good move, but there's something in my head telling me it could be a bit of fun. Like, not many people are going to buy Vardy that week. And the nice thing about buying Vardy is, actually no, I was going to say it means I can bench Evan Nielsen, but I would still want to bench one of Sarr or Eze, I think. So I would do that move in 37, buying Vardy. That gives me 4.6 in the bank, so that's not enough to do Sarr to Saka, because Saka's 10.3 as it stands. So if he goes down in price, maybe I could do it. So I would have to sell Eze instead, and I would just bring in Saka this week. By the way, I don't think getting Saka for Newcastle at home is like a must, but I'd rather have Saka than I would a Crystal Palace midfielder after their FA Cup final. So I would make that move, and then I would just bench Sarr for Rodgers. So I would be having Salah in Burmo, Rodgers, same as the previous thing, but I'd have Saka instead of Palmer. Then Isak up front because I haven't sold him against Arsenal away, which is not ideal because I'm probably going to have to play 1 or 2 Arsenal defenders that week. Then Vardy and Evan Nielsen again, and I just bench Sarr. And then in 38, because I've got Saka in place, it means I can just sell Sarr for another Bournemouth attacker. Potentially Semenyo, by the way, is a differential over Kluivert, but I could just go for Kluivert if I wanted to. And then my attack just looks a lot better. So if I just put Evan Nielsen in, instead of Vardy probably, I'd then have Salah Palace at home, Mbeumo Wolves away, Rodgers Man United away, Saka Southampton away, Semenyo Leicester at home, Evan Nielsen Leicester at home, and Isak Everton at home. It's a really close call between all those moves, right? If I keep Isak, I quite like him for 38 much more than Marmoush, especially if Newcastle are still fighting for Champions League. But I've got to play him against Arsenal away, which is not great. But like if I sell Isak instead, I get a better forward. Then I don't get Jamie Vardy for Ipswich at home, which I've kind of talked myself into. And then if I get Palmer for captaincy, it means I can't have a second Bournemouth attacker against Leicester. So I think it's all quite a tight call. Right now, I'm leaning towards keeping Isak, selling Marmoush in 37 and getting Vardy and just going straight for Saka and just captaining Saka against Newcastle or Salah against Brighton. But I do like the fact that Palmer's ownership is so low and he's probably going to be playing against a rotating Man United team. And Chelsea will probably go full strength because they're still fighting for Champions League places. So, like I said, that's how the plans potentially work out. All a bit of a ramble. But ideally, if I can get Saka Southampton away and have double Bournemouth defence against Leicester, I think that looks quite nice. Let me know what you think about those plans. Sometimes someone comes up with a much better one that I've not thought of, but I like how both of those looked. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, check out Fantasy Football Hub using the link in the description below, and I will catch you again tomorrow for final thoughts.